19th of July, and I wasn't a part of the. I was a part of the sending off from Vadstena, but I wasn't part of the first part in the walk. Me and a friend joined in Amsterdam in the beginning of October, and then we were walking. Yeah, we took the ferry from Amsterdam to Newcastle, but we walked in Netherlands and in England and Scotland for 3 weeks. So and that was an amazing experience, and this you feel very in some way left out to others to care about you. We were getting food and shelter from different congregations during this walk, and every day you get up early, you pack, and then you eat breakfast, and then you walk. And it was about 20, 25, maybe 30 kilometers each day we have to walk to come to the next town or congregation where we should sleep for the night. And one particular experience that I thought of it this morning was that when you walk, you have a very special feeling for time and for distance. And one thing in particular that I thought of was, I think, let's see if I can share my screen. I have a picture here. Was when we walked around the Schiphol airport in Netherlands. I think we walked around this airport. It's the biggest airport in Europe, and it somehow represents the modern way of traveling, and a way of traveling that we can't afford in the future. And it almost took half a day to walk around this enormous airport. And when you go by car or you go by train or by bus, you go in a speed that's not the human way to transport you. So this was a very peculiar feeling. You walked and walked, and the only thing you saw half the day was this airport in different directions. So that's one immediate thing I was thinking about when Toya asked me if I could talk about some specifics during this walk. And of course, it's another, you come into a special mood when you're walking, and this is very, very nice. And you meet people, you engage with people, you talk with people, and you also have the time to reflect. And in my case, the goal of this walk in some way was to reflecting about what I'm going to do in the future, what's meaningful to do in this line of climate work and so on. And I can say that when we came to England, to Newcastle, it was a really great experience. It was raining when we came off the ferry, but after 1 or maybe 2 hours, we came to a school, and the children, they have made these posters with all these sayings you can see in all the marches. Let the oil stay in the ground, we must do it now, and so on. And we really feel very welcome when we came, and that was very, very nice when we have walked in the rain and so on, and they even sing songs for us and give us a good cup of tea. So we really felt that we were welcome to England. And during this walk through the English landscape, we walk up the Northumbrian coast and even visit the Holy Island. So it was a fantastic feeling, and you can even see the shorelines and the sea that has eaten the shoreline. So that we have very concrete evidence on this this climate and what the climate does to the land and to the seashores. And when we came to Scotland, the landscape became different. Actually, it was very steep and very much climbing, but it was very, very nice. And the most impressive thing was when we on the Saturday gathered in the Glasgow Green with all the other pilgrims, and I don't know if you see this picture.
We see the airplane still.
Yeah, okay, I changed that. Stop sharing. I do a new sharing here. There. It was a very great feeling when we came to Glasgow Green on the Saturday, the day before the climate summit begins, and took place in this very, very nice walk through Glasgow to George Square, where we were gathered all the pilgrims, and the leaders of the pilgrimage held their speech and talk why we had walked to Glasgow. And for my case, it's as I'm not just an environmentalist and an activist, I'm also a Quaker. And one of the sayings in the Quaker movement is that if something is wrong, you have to address that to those in power and walk to them and speak truth to power. And I feel that just a pilgrimage walk through England and Scotland up to Glasgow was the right thing to do these times, and just say we have to do something and we have to do it now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Niklas. I would love to we have to sit down one day. I want to know so much more about this pilgrimage. I was thinking, when you went back from Glasgow, did you take the train or did you fly?
No, I didn't fly. We were taking the train, and it almost took almost two days to get back. And we were taking the train to London, under the Channel to Brussels, have an overnight stay in Brussels, and some train exchange through Belgium, Germany, Denmark, and Sweden. So it was, and it's fantastic that you can do this, and you meet so much people, and even scientists from Glasgow attended the meeting. So it's very nice. You can speak to people. You can, yeah, you feel the travel in another way than you do when you're flying, and like walking, it's the walk is very natural if you do it a couple of days in a row, and you feel that your body is made for this, really made for this. Yeah.
I love it. Also, I was thinking there's been a lot of complaints how it took 2 hours or two whole days and nights to travel to Glasgow from Stockholm. But
Yeah.
for you, that was nothing going with the train. It was almost going too fast, yeah?
Yeah, almost. And it's quite obvious when you go by train after you have been walking a certain distance, how fast everything goes. And you imagine this speed. You can feel the speed and the difference in speed when you have something very obvious to compare with. Yeah.
And now you're back in Stockholm. You've possibly not already sorted out everything, all the impressions and everything. But what is your key takeaway from the whole shebang, the whole experience, the walk and the being in COP?
I can say that I shared a piece of interview with Chris Peckham on Facebook, where he was summit the whole meeting and sum up the whole meeting, and I think that's quite good interview, and there was some achievements done, but as many others of us, I'm not pleased with the result. It's we have to do things much more fast, and yeah, there was some cooperations made. There were some. We had the book of the Paris Agreement, but I think we must speed it up very much, and so we don't have this huge temperature rising. And I think we are talking about in these days 2.7 degrees Celsius if we don't do more than we have promised in this agreement. So I think we have to do much more quicker.
Yeah, hurry up to take it slow. Jennifer, please, you are also into pilgrimage, but of another sort, by bike, more or less. And you're from Glasgow, you're a climate researcher and an activist, and well, I'm not going to give everything away. Please do the introducing yourself.
First, will unmute myself. And yeah, I was gonna try and get some pictures similar to as Niklas has, but this is quite spontaneous. And those were here at the beginning. Anyone who has experienced a big conference, such as something perhaps like AGU or EGU, you know, it is a whirlwind. And I think that almost for me, it maybe is a little soon to be doing a proper like debrief and account of COP26, because there's still so much to share and process myself to be able to share. But I think a nice lead from what Niklas was saying, he mentioned with the airport picture about the human way and how walking kind of introduced or kind of inspired that from the pilgrimage. And I have a similar story. So the picture you see behind me is from a place called Cathkin Braes in Glasgow. It overlooks the city. And as well as being a scientist, I am also an adventurer and an athlete. And at the moment, the mountain biking for me is the part. And so this picture behind me shows Glasgow from my favorite perspective, one that I get to see so often. And before I go on to talk about my experience of COP, just a wee side story of that human way and my experience of that here in COP26 actually was from a day off that Alasdair gave myself and some friends of Fridays for Future. And he took us to Glentilt to tell a brilliant story. But one of the Friday for Future's friends, Callan, she took off her shoes like almost straight away and went barefoot. And within about 5 minutes, it inspired me to do the same. And for me, that was a profound moment of just feeling that human way. And I think that's a really strong message that may come from COP26. So back to my experience of it, overall, at this point in time, I can say, yeah, as a Glaswegian myself, you know, anyone who knows me personally will know that I am a proud Scot, but I have never been so proud to be Glaswegian. And we have a saying, so I can't actually see Zoom at this point in time. So it's a bit, let me just see if I can get it bigger and the right video here before continuing so that I can see all windows. No, all right, I don't see the Zoom meeting at all. But yeah, this saying, people make Glasgow. It was so true, and came to really hold meaning whilst we were in Glasgow, because I think I share the sentiments of many of us that, yes, the Glasgow Pact that came from COP26, it's disappointing. It doesn't go far enough, and risks to extinguish the hope that we still have. However, I had the most amazing experience of COP26 because together with Alasdair and a film crew from Stockholm University, started to actually film the people's perspective of COP26, because for me, what I experienced, and I think Niklas has already shared that, is that COP26 feels like the point in which things changed, and change for the better, change towards, saving our species. And that's because it wasn't really about what happened on the inside at COP26. Yes, brilliant things happened in the blue zone, also a lot of disappointing things. But the most amazing part of COP26 was that everybody that embarked on Glasgow embraced the people make Glasgow spirit. We all came together. David Attenborough opened up COP26 by saying we need to come together. And we really responded to that. I felt such an energy in Glasgow through the 2 weeks, and, being part of the COP Coalition, Global Day of Action, the march on the Saturday in the middle of COP26. The energy is something that I still don't quite know how to describe. It was phenomenal. And by being able to speak to so many different people, not just from the inside, but more so who were here on the outside, who really made it feel such an amazing experience. Sorry, I completely lost my trail there because this is spontaneous. But that overall message was one of real just hope and empowerment, because, we came together here in Glasgow. We lit a spark was lit of this togetherness working. And now we just need to nurture and grow that into a flame of change. And so I'll go on to now describe a little bit about the personal experience that I got, because through capturing the people's perspective, I learned in the last 2 weeks so much about not just the world that we live in and what we need to do to save it as a world we can continue to live in. But I also learned so much about myself, and in particular, a message that's poignant today and in this meeting with Researchers Desk, is that I learned that, as a climate scientist, I do have a role to play, but there are also other roles which I can play, being the same person, in terms of what we do going forward, and that learning that and seeing that as climate scientists, we have such a role to play in. And not just the science and the backing and that side of things, but also in making action and change happen. And we're possibly like some of the best placed people to be able to do that. And I hope that Aleister will come on to kind of support and share that kind of same sentiment, that there was a real energy in Glasgow, and that's what's made me, like, I've never been prouder to be a Glaswegian, and it meant so much for this all to happen here. But I think that there is a message going forward. It is a message of hope. It's a message that change is happening, and that we as researchers have a really important role in that. And so I think I'm going to leave it there, because I feel I'm beginning to ramble, and also I cannot see the Zoom conversation at all. So let's see if I can find it again. But was that a clear message? Do you want to put a question to us as I get Zoom back up?
Yes, I want to hear a little bit about what happened on the Friday with Researchers Desk going abroad. and also your intentions to do a pilgrimage with bikes back to Stockholm from Glasgow.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to share this. So yeah, first of all, on Friday here in Glasgow, we launched Researchers Desk UK. And I'm so both proud and honoured and privileged to be the person coordinating Researchers Desk UK, and excited to really grow it and you know, in conjunction with everything that Researchers Desk has already been doing. And so, yeah, I would love for anybody to get involved with Researchers Desk UK. Excited to see where we take that, and of course we'll be working still very closely with Researchers Desk. It's still one and the same thing. And yeah, going on to the pilgrimage that was inspired from COP26 Glasgow and my experiences there, but also from a while before when I guess these opportunities arose through attending a Boleyn Centre course in it was called Storytelling for the Climate and Ecological Crises, and really that inspired so much. And I saw, I think back then, we already knew that the Glasgow Climate Pact was unlikely to deliver what we wanted and what is needed. However, there's the Stockholm Plus 50 meeting coming up in June 22. And we're going to be launching, it's going to be Ride COP26 to Stockholm 50. And we'll share much more about this. But yeah, it's going to be a fantastic bike relay, essentially, with a core team from Glasgow to Stockholm to arrive for the meeting in June, with a lot of hope that, you know, whereas the Glasgow Climate Pact didn't go far enough, maybe we can change that at Stockholm Plus 50. And so, yeah, I look forward to sharing more about this bike ride to this pilgrimage to Stockholm Plus 50. And yeah, how everybody can get involved with that, because we absolutely need everybody getting involved with it.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. It's lovely to hear your thoughts from the COP and being so positive anyway. I think possibly Niklas Hällström, who's been around for many COPs. I don't know if you're positive or negative, but I expect a little bit more negative tone. But please, Nicklas Hällström.
Thank you. Well, I guess it's a choice whether to be positive or negative. It's a crazy place. These COPs, was there 39,000 people registered, I think, and you know, you have your allies and your good friends and amazing people coming there, and you can meet and plot and scheme and work together and be incredibly encouraged by that. And then you look to the actual negotiations, and a whole lot of other folks, including the biggest delegation, as you've probably picked up, was the fossil fuel industry. They exceeded any other country, and you know, there's a whole lot of pretty problematic and even, you know, very, yeah, to say the least, folks around as well. So it's really a mixed bag. Well, just to give you a sketch, maybe it's the most exhausting thing. 2 weeks of crazy intense meetings, and also the shock of not having seen a single person almost in real life. And there's all of a sudden thousands of people coming your way, and you know, all this interaction. In any case, so unbelievably intense, and myself also wearing quite a few hats. You're spreading thin, and it's a bit tricky. So I was there to, on the one hand, work on the fossil fuel treaty, which I think many of you are aware of, which was a great success, I would say. That was really encouraging. A lot of traction, even over the 2 weeks, and coming into COP, the idea of the initiative had already really kind of taken off exponentially, I would say. So I can talk more about that, but very, very positive, including having conversations with folks in the Swedish delegation and the Swedish Ministry in Government on Stockholm 50. So we hope we can really get a breakthrough there on maybe the most promising avenue, I would say, in terms of breaking new ground to real action. I was following pretty bad stuff, including geoengineering and the launch of many of these new initiatives that were sort of done on the sidelines, including something maybe that was under the radar of many of you, Aim4C, so a new agriculture kind of initiative that is opening the door for transnationals and big corporations to basically move towards a further takeover of the agriculture sector. And I think Sweden is sort of in the loop of that, so that's quite problematic. Gates-funded United Arab Emirates and US driving this. I followed net zero, real zero discussions a lot. Can come back to that a little bit in terms of how it ended up in the framing, but we're also in part of a very good statement that I think I shared on another research desk Zoom earlier on, with 700 organizations coming together before COP to really kind of put forward the critique of how net zero is being used and push for real solutions and real zero. I'll add a link in the chat also if you haven't seen that. So that work was sort of continuously happening throughout the COP. I worked a lot with and reconnected a lot with African friends, in particular working on renewables, as we have been involved with that for a very long time, and we're hoping now to really boost that and reclaim that work, looking to next year in Egypt, the African COP, which can really offer some great opportunities to advance a real solutions, people-centered energy agenda. So I was very happy to reconnect and get to know a lot of new people around that work. I linked up a lot with youth as well, which was very encouraging. I would say that the clarity in calling out the absolute failures of the established process is remarkable, as we know, but they did really well in this crazy space, and also advancing fair shares and equity generally. And we launched a report that was many of us have been working on an equitable phase out of fossil fuels, which ties a lot to this idea of a fossil fuel treaty. Just a few words on the meeting as such. I think you picked that up. It was really a lot of people, but the least inclusive ever. And of course, vaccine apartheid and the way the UK government pushed this through was super problematic. And again, having the fossil fuel industry still being allowed to be there. There's a precedent in the WHO, which bans the tobacco industry to be part of the lobbying and being part in the negotiations. And those efforts still are, there's calls for that, but there's nothing restricting the fossil fuel industry to really be in the midst of everything and have a very significant impact on what's happening. So much to say about, of course, the whole setup in itself. On the negotiations, well, again, I was very happy throughout, again, because so much good things to do on all these issues that I just listed. But looking to the negotiations, which I do also follow with good friends in the climate justice community, of course, it was absolutely dismal, as always, really, and a deja vu, like, seen this now for probably 10 times, where so much comes down to the battle of narratives too, and the effort to spin, and Greta calls this out like nobody, the way to mislead by looking like you're a leader and not doing it, using terms, appropriating terms, launching all these. So a lot of the what happened in COP was an incredible, and this was conscious, right, efforts by not least UK and others to spread out all these initiatives and launches of very hollow, unsubstantiated, and absolutely no binding kinds of commitments to look to methane and forests and this agriculture initiative I mentioned, and a whole slew of other things to make it look like things are happening. Many of these are super problematic in themselves. Some of them opens doors for solutions. Some are just distractions and won't really fly. At the same time, when you look at what's actually being negotiated, it's the same old story. The rich countries consistently have been refusing to provide any kind of openings for progress on really key issues that needs to be negotiated successfully. Finance, nothing happening to developing countries. Loss and damage. This was a success actually, because civil society in particular managed to raise this issue of loss and damage very effectively together with also some developing countries. And it was so close to actually set up not just a talk show, but a facility to provide real support and finance. And last minute, who stopped it? US. US is back. And that means they're back the way they were under Obama and before, which is pretty much stopping everything behind the scenes, but having a very slick machinery to look like they're the leaders and divert attention to China, India, and other developing countries in particular. Very sobering to see the kind of, again, same people also coming back so that they were, involved before. The other piece, of course, that was happening, you've picked that up on the fossil fuels part. Of course, it was a breakthrough in the fact that for the first time ever, fossil fuels are mentioned. Again, the spin here, and we can talk more about that, is pretty problematic to see how, India wasn't smart to kind of, they should have figured out what would happen in terms of media spin, but the fact that they made this intervention in the end to phase down rather than phase out of coal. They had actually placed language in negotiations earlier in the week to say all fossil fuels, not just coal, oil and gas included, where US, Canada, Russia are the biggest, the ones with the biggest plans to expand even, were included. And they said it's got to be done also with equity. So they actually had very progressive and far-reaching suggestions. That was killed by the US. And in the end, when they pushed back and tried to get an equity principle in here together with the phase down, of course, it got all projected as they were the ones who were the evils and were pushing back on something everybody wanted, which was unabated coal, which means CCS coal. So it's not even coal, it's actually CCS-based coal. So very, very problematic the way that all happened, and we can talk more about it, obviously, but and share you some links, also some really insightful and clear stories or coverage of that never came through, I think, much in mainstream media. And then, of course, we got markets, which is sort of slipped under the radar. So we might, we'll start now with new markets. Most likely, that is part of the book, the rule book, and it's been stalled for many years because of a lot of resistance from civil society in several developing countries and rich countries also fighting each other's loopholes. But the pressure to have some agreement, that's happened over and over again in all these negotiations. People cave in. The rich countries in particular call up the poorer countries' presidents and exert other pressures, and you get a deal. And a whole lot of problematic stuff comes along. One good thing that happened was the first ever inclusion of agroecology in the text. So I think what we can say, without sounding too negative, but I think we need to be realistic and clear on what actually happens in these negotiations. But of course, it is a narrative battle. There's a placeholder for bringing in, hooks for our wider struggle. Where again, as you've said, and Niklas and Jennifer, being part of the outside work, the mobilization, people seeing through, calling this out, mobilizing and deciding that we will survive and we will really get to real solutions is incredibly powerful. And you'd really get a lot of that, of course, in the COP as well. And inside these opportunities, we need to kind of nurture as much as we can. So the fact that fossil fuels the tide is turning in many ways, even in the text, and these initiatives, and likewise, agroecology rather than this other initiative for even more extreme industrial agriculture are really hopeful things. And I'll stop there. So much to talk about and discuss. But
yes, the secret conversations that media hasn't got hold of. We would love to hear more of those, obviously. But did you feel first, Jennifer was feeling that this was really a social tipping point kind of thing? Correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer. But did you feel the same? Did you feel that this COP, something really important happened? Of course, the fossil was mentioned, but something more.
I am a true believer in social tipping points. That's my theory of change, and I think we're building to that. I think that COP, many things that happen in the COP helps. Some things might have made it a bit harder, but on the other hand, I think that just might come back to bite those folks who are pushing the wrong way, as well, because the more we expose the scams and actually propose real, put forward and really drive the real sort of radical change that is needed, I think the closer we get to some kind of tipping point for sure. People have the power. I mean, being at a COP, it's a very, very crazy thing, right? The whole world is in this room. They have the power to decide, and they are very, very vulnerable or prone to, if enough of us are actually demanding, the right to life, basically, we will win. But I wouldn't say it was like a major decisive tipping point and it's all going the right way now. It's a messy place.
Just a quickie, for the civil society to put pressure on the next COP, I mean in Egypt, would it do anything good if we were all going against the fossil fuel industry being there at all? I mean, if the civil society were more aware of this beforehand and put pressure on that, would it matter, you think? Could it prevent?
Did you ask me, Toya, or general question?
Sorry?
Did you ask me?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think, to understand the politics of the actual negotiations and what's going on at a COP, one has to understand a lot is happening way before and in capitals and in calls that is not happening in the actual negotiations. So the sort of geopolitics and power at play is there, right? So even if there was no fossil fuel industry representative at the COP, they would still exert an enormous influence because you have the channels and they do the work before. It's only so much you can do during these 2 weeks of negotiations. Most positions are hammered out way before. So I wouldn't say that's the thing that determines whether things go the right or wrong way, but it's a very symbolically important thing to do. And of course, it has a direct impact as well, because they do things in the COP too. But one has to kind of understand that we need to work now. It's not to wait, until the months of COP next time. That's a mistake most people do. The work begins now. We have to make it impossible for a Swedish negotiator or Swedish government or any government in any country to go to COP and pretend they're doing enough. There's nothing here that is compatible with 1.5 in any way. I mean, it's like so, and everybody tries to spin it as if they've sort of done it in some way or on the right track. We have to call that out, and scientists, not least, together with everybody else. That has to happen way before. So the positions can't be made, that aren't aligned with what needs to be done. So we start tomorrow, or continue tomorrow.
So there's hands in the air, and Alasdair hasn't spoken yet, so we try to keep it short. Jennifer, no, Niklas, I don't know. Jennifer first.
So yeah, it was again just to thank you, Niklas. You actually inspired, and with that really rational view from having been in there, help us to see that this cycle relay is part of that working now, not just in the month before the next meeting. And actually, perhaps you disagree, but for me, I talk about the energy at the march on the Saturday, but perhaps the most defining moment of that empowerment and the people taking power into their own hands was the following Friday, when it started as a Friday for Future strike outside the gates of the Blue Zone. But partway through, I think led by the People's Plenary, there was a walkout, and so many people, hundreds of people from the inside, stepped outside and said, no, we're going and joining. There's better things happening outside, and came and joined the strike. And for me, that was such a powerful and defining moment. And I'm not sure, if you kind of saw or experienced that and felt the same way, perhaps.
I wasn't there, but I think it's very powerful when people walk out and join with those on the outside. And I think the social pressure that both you and Toya and Niklas are talking about. I think that's the most important that we can put up. We must show those in charge that we, the people, don't accept this anymore, and I think that's one of the most important learnings to do from this COP. From the outside perspective is to build up this pressure of peaceful resistance and peaceful ideas about what we can do. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nicklas and Niklas, Jennifer. We'll let Alasdair have his take on the COP from his point of view.
I'm going to share screen in a different way, which is going to involve sharing sound and optimizing for video, which means you won't see each other. I hope that's okay.
For now.
Yeah, you can turn me off afterwards. Toya, can you see my slide?
Yes, Alasdair.
Yes, I can.
Thank you very much. So I find it really instructive listening to both Niklas's and Jenny. I was both inside and outside the COP, and I want to share some of my reflections from the time there. And as Toya has pointed out, this was my first COP. And for me, it was an educational experience. I'm a geologist and not particularly up on how these kind of decisions happen. So I wanted to share some reflections with you, and hopefully you can end up as confused as I am. For the time I was at the COP, I spent a lot of time thinking about the cathedral in Cologne, which you see in front of you now. I passed on the way to the COP and on the way back. And I will explain why as I go through this short presentation as what that cathedral has to do with the COP26 meeting. I had the privilege of being able to enter the blue zone as an observer at the meeting. And I want to give you a short feel for what it's like actually being inside the blue zone. It was a challenging time for Glasgow, which I will underline what Jenny said. People make Glasgow. The people of Glasgow were utterly fantastic at organising this event in the warmest and friendliest manner. I left Scotland very proud to be Scottish and wishing I was Glaswegian. This is what it feels like to go in. Long and twisting queues. Everyone to have their COVID checks on the way through, making sure you've had your daily test. They'd linked together all of the Scottish Exhibition Centre venues with passage tunnels made of plastic that you walk through to get where you were going. And when you actually get in, as an observer, one spends a lot of time in the pavilions. And this is a place where you get fairly, among other things, seasick. Everything's in a hurry. You're passing endless countries who've set up enormously expensive and glamorous displays, explaining how good they are and what they're doing to save the climate crisis. As you're walking through this maze, what I did feel and I was missing is there was an enormous lack of science in here. There are occasionally, there's a science pavilion, there are a few others, but this is a place where my feeling was it's for everyone to show show themselves off, how great they are, what their achievements are. I'm going to let you walk through I'm going to let you walk through the pavilion with me for another 20 or so seconds. And I hope you're feeling the stress, because my first day at the COP was just a feeling of enormous stress. I didn't know where I was, what I was doing, what was the purpose of being there. And it was an endless rush of people. And as Niklas said, I didn't know how many. Niklas, I thank you for telling us that. This was my home for my time in the blue zone. This is the Cryosphere Pavilion, and this what I did like about the Cryosphere Pavilion. It was a little safe space for scientists where we talked about science, and I was there to talk about the dangers of solar geoengineering, which many of you already understand. At the COP, you can participate as an observer in various meetings, and in this particular meeting, I was hearing a panel discussion on the COP's response to the IPCC report. 1.5 degrees was mentioned endlessly, which made me happy because that's what we should be mentioning. As Niklas has already said, how close we got to success there, and it's not close enough. Throughout the COP, you find various tributes to the world outside. I would want to save the world and end pollution or anything that is bad happening to the world, from Emilio, 12 years old, from Bermuda. This is the biggest crisis humanity has ever faced. This is not something you can like on Facebook, from 9-year-old Ian from Angola. And many art forms sharing what people's feelings about the climate crisis: stop climate meltdown, no nature equals no future. And of course, cartoons making a joke of it, breaking news, COP moves adaptation from blah, blah, blah to yes, yes, yes. They better not take another 26 years to act, act, act. But I want to illustrate what Niklas talked to us about, because I quickly joined an underground network where you got quick access to looking at the documents as they evolved. And the outcome, one of the outcomes is the Glasgow Climate Pact. And Niklas has already mentioned this, so this is really timely to have these pictures. This was a statement on the 10th of November in the first draft. Niklas, rather than I, can comment on the nuances, but here it says, the Conference of the Parties calls upon parties to accelerate the phasing out of coal and subsidies for fossil fuels. What I did not know until Niklas spoke today was that there was an earlier version where it was in all of fossil fuels. This was the first version I saw. 2 days later, it had been heavily edited. And there's all sorts of stuff in there that's kind of important. Sometimes add-ons, which I think probably weaken it. And then notice this unabated coal power and its inefficient subsidies now. And as we moved on to the 13th of November, we're talking about efforts towards, rather than the actual phase out of unabated coal power and inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. And then add-ons, which look really good, but I think probably weaken for what was an initially very strong text. Again, Niklas can comment more than I about the nuances here. And in the final version, phase out, as Niklas said himself, was replaced with phase down. And this is, as I like to see, the evolution of a sentence in the Glasgow Climate Pact. But at the same time, it's very easy to stand on the outside and feel an anger towards the people on the inside, that they're, and I kept reminding myself that the people who are sitting in those negotiating rooms are parents with children. And this must be incredibly hard for them. So my prayers go out to them as to how to deal with this, and how do you possibly locked into a system that you did not necessarily create yourself. And you know you have to come back and tell lots of people what you did, and some people want this and some people want that. How can you break the mold? For me, I had the privilege of being able to break out, and I was able to break out and dance with Extinction Rebellion. This is what Jenny is talking about it was all happening outside. Now, I don't know how many of you know what Cayley is, but this is a beautiful way of expressing the love of the Scottish Highlands and all of Scotland. But this was the most beautiful form of demonstration. Here we're showing the heart of Scotland, Scottish friendship, wrapping around the top. This was a positive demonstration. And as Jenny said, I had the enormous pleasure and luxury of, on one day, taking the young protesters up to the Scottish Highlands. This is one of them, running through the woods barefoot in the woods of Glentilt. And our own Simon behind, from who many of you have met at Mintoriat. My feeling, I took one day off during the COP, and I took this day off because I wanted these young people to have a day off, a day not thinking about the climate crisis. a day sharing and enjoying the beauty of the Highlands where they were. And it was a wonderful occasion. One always has to remember that these young protesters are children. They're just like our kids, and they sometimes seem like the most grown-up people in the world, but they are just young people. They're young people who, when you get
on the bonny, bonny banks of the Lowland. Sing grace, how sweet the sound that saved the wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
What was going on at COP26 was we were building a cathedral. And the cathedral was like Cologne Cathedral, which for those of you, many of you know, they started building in 1200s and it was finished 600 years later. We're putting bricks in that cathedral, whether it's as a negotiator from inside the COP or whether it is as a youth protester from outside the COP, or whether it is as an NGO heavily trying to influence the COP. And the cathedral that we're building is something that we will not see the result of, but it is something that future generations will see the result of. And I felt there was a sense of beauty at the COP, and I felt that the people both inside and outside were working very, very hard within very, very different frameworks for a better future.
Wow, thank you. That's a very lovely film, Aleister. You really took us through the whole meeting, and beautiful with that highland footage with the young strikers. Also, I got the picture of the Chinese whisper there of the final deal, how it just watered down, but let's not lose hope and faith. It's the people's power, of course. Anyway, we have questions. We have Alexander, who would love to ask a question since a long time ago.
Yeah, sorry, I'm muting myself here. Wow, I had my question before listening to you, Aleister, and gosh, I can barely even remember the question. Thanks so much for bringing us all to Glasgow. My question has to do with the parties versus all the non-state actors who are there. You've mentioned several of them. You've mentioned, all of you have mentioned several. You've mentioned, of course, the protesters and the pilgrims and the marchers, the scientists you can consider as a non-state actor. But there's one in particular which, reading about COP in Swedish media and in other media, felt like it was a little overpowering, and that was the voice of the corporate world. I think, Aleister, when you say that countries wanted to show how good they were, the best way to do that, of course, is to invite your so-called best companies. And part of me says, yeah, that's really not a good idea because they shouldn't be there. And part of me says, well, they're also a very, very important holder. And the fact that they are there, enriches in some way the conversation and the general feeling. And they also have a role to play in the building of the cathedral. Would any of the four of you want just to comment on that? And maybe Niklas Hällström, since you've been to so many, maybe say a few words about whether you feel that this has changed, if their presence was more overpowering in Glasgow, and if that's good or bad or both. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Alasdair. That was amazing. Brilliant to kind of be really showing the imagery. That's a way to talk about these things, both for those who haven't been and for those who need to remember, and also for taking the youth also to the Scottish Highlands. That's truly brilliant. Well, to your question, Alexander, I guess I would say that, I mean, I think it's super problematic the way it's become a trade fair. You have several things happening in parallel and kind of disconnected. So the negotiations is followed by a few who really understand what's going on, and there's all these kinds of back deals, etc. As we, which is clear. And then you have this huge trade fair of people, as Aleister said, also wanting to show off, and you have countries trying to promote themselves by using their businesses, etc. Right? And of course, you have a lot of very, very problematic businesses taking stage and pouring money into these. These pavilions are crazy. I mean, the amounts of PR put into this is very, very substantial. And I think that's, in most cases or many cases, very, very problematic. But some, of course, are probably quite okay. But I think, just to take a step back, I think what we're talking about here is, to me at least, when I see COP, we have also a whole lot of people here, less so inside, but quite a few inside, and then all the parallel work in the civil society spaces and other spaces, which are clearly saying that, the system is wrong. And this is what the youth are saying repeatedly. We can't deal with this within the confines of a present economic and sort of power system that we see at play, where the corporations are the sort of the in a way, the ultimate expression, in a way. We have to really look to what more radical and transformative changes that are needed, and calling that out and actually pointing to the solutions that we do have. And many of those have been discussed in researchers' desks, workshops over and over again. I think to a large extent that is non-existent in the formal space in COP. So what we have is negotiations are trying to, squeeze these solutions to 1.5 into a business as usual, largely framework in terms of how the societies work, right? What is development and so on, right to development. And that just doesn't work. What you end up with then unavoidably is the net zero narrative, which we called out already in this op-ed a year ago. And what we now see also in a very, very fast advancement of geoengineering discourses. I saw probably 20 articles and launches of things behind the scenes on geoengineering, because that's the only way to reconcile a recognition that we have a very non-existent, basically, carbon budget with recognizing climate change, but not really being too happy about or believing that we can do this changes that needs to be done in society. And then you have the discourses we see largely manifested by the corporations at place. No corporations are talking about the radical change we really need. And so I think that's super problematic, because it just takes away attention from the real transformative work we need to do. I would say I'm more worried than ever after this COP that we might slide into, and the forces at play consciously trying to get us onto a geoengineering track, and quick fix techno solution because we won't face the inequalities we're having, etc., etc. So I guess that's a long winding answer, but that makes me very, very skeptical about the sort of the simple narrative around business will kind of deal with this and solve it for us.